Awesome. How's everybody doing tonight? Sweet. Well, we'll go ahead and get started here in a second. We thank you guys so much for joining us and taking some time to be with us this evening. Let me just switch my screen to speaker mode here. There we go. All right. So thank you so much for joining us for our See Where ACE Takes You event tonight. We're going to go ahead and discuss some career paths available to ACE graduates, both within and outside the sphere of education. So you guys are lucky enough to hear from a few alumni who have used their ACE experiences to find success in fields like business, graduate studies, and international educations. So before we dive into that, just to give you a little sense for our structure tonight, we'll begin with some introductions. I'll ask a few questions of our panelists that are specific to their ACE experiences and current roles. Then we'll invite questions from all of you. So when we get to that part of the program, I'll share a couple of directions on how to do so. But until then, I just recommend that you keep your screen in speaker view so that you'll be able to see each panelist clearly throughout the event. So let's go ahead and get started. If our panelists would be so kind to introduce yourselves, so you guys just want to say who you are, where you're from, what your ACE placement was, and what your teaching experience is like, and as well as your current role and the work you're doing today.
I can go first. So my name is Hannah Morris. I taught in San Jose, California, and I taught middle school math and science at St. John the Baptist. And right now I'm back in grad school, but getting my master's in public health.
Awesome.
Everybody, I'm Matt Rhodes. I was in ACE in New Orleans. I taught middle school Latin, religion, and English. I think I was the first and probably last Latin teacher that ACE has had. Read into that what you will. And now, so after I finished teaching in ACE, I worked for the ACE team for 3 years before making the natural transition from faith-based education into finance. And so I work at Goldman Sachs now in the executive office. I'm the chief of staff to the executive vice president of the firm.
And I am Matt Madden. I did my placement in Brownsville, Texas, right on the border of Mexico. I taught middle school social studies. And after ACE, I worked for 2 years in New York City as a middle school English and social studies teacher. And now I'm currently living in Santiago, Chile, and I'm going to be teaching 10th grade and 12th grade English at St. George's College here in Santiago.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for those introductions, and just really excited to hear your perspective tonight. And just really quickly, I want to point out, Hannah did have the misfortune of being in the same ACE class as me. So if you want to say some extra prayers for her, I know she's been through a lot with that. But one of the best cards players you'll ever meet. So when we get to the question part of tonight, if you want to ask her some questions about how to win every single game of Egyptian Rat Screw, that might be something to keep in mind. But we'll get started with the questions then. So my first question, and this is going to be for Matt and Hannah, since you guys have kind of moved away from careers in education. My question is, did you guys always plan on going into a career like the one you're in now, even prior to ACE? And if so, what compelled you to complete a program like ACE that's seemingly unrelated? And if not, how has your ACE experience, or did your ACE experience help you determine your new career path?
Hannah, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So I was pre-med in undergrad, and I was definitely on the pre-med track, and I thought I would go to med school after graduating. But then I think that it was because of the ACE team just does such a great job of like spreading the news of ACE and really creating interest in ACE in such a good-hearted way. And so through one of my RAs, my freshman year, just the idea of ACE was put in my mind. And the mission of ACE just was kind of put in my heart. And so I began thinking of, well, med school can still be on the table, but maybe I want to do ACE after graduation and really explore that and explore what it means to serve others. I really developed that definition of service, seeing how we can meet students or children, adolescents where they are, and really serving their hearts too. And I think ACE does it in such a nice way that it does it holistically. So I did ACE and I was in like my first year, still thinking about med school, but thinking about it a little bit less. And in undergrad, I was also a poverty studies minor. So I was interested in med school, but it just kind of got to the point where I wasn't the most interested in med school for plans after ACE. And I realized that I was actually more interested in public health, that I'm interested in health, but I'm interested in how the public experiences health and how external factors, including education and education access, really affect people's health outcomes and people's experiences with health. So even though I'm not teaching right now, I would certainly say that my time in ACE impacted where I am right now.
Yeah, I think so. What led me to ACE, when I was an undergrad, I'm a little bit older than the other panelists here. So I have I'm more than 1 year older than you, Maddie. And so I had when I was in undergrad, there was not quite the normal the trend of getting summer internships was like almost became standard when I was in college. So like before I started in college in 2010. By the time I left in 2014, internships had become sort of a ubiquitous thing that people did. But I missed that memo. Like I didn't get it from whoever was delivering it. And so I spent my summers rowing on the Schuylkill River in Philadelphia because I was on the rowing team at Notre Dame. And instead of maybe trying to think about, hey, I should try to maybe want to be employed after college, I spent that time rowing. And I don't regret that. But then by the time I was a senior, I was sort of looking around and trying to think about what were the things that I wanted to do. And I wrote a senior thesis that my main takeaway from was it's important to learn to help other people and like serve other people. And I realized that I was a very selfish person. And this combination of rowing is a brutally fair sport where if you work hard, you get faster. If you put in the time, you get better. And so I sort of took that mindset of, well, you're a selfish person, but if you spend time in situations that make you want to give of yourself, and more importantly, or at least as importantly, around people who are giving, which I can promise you is true in ACE, there are so many people, like you will find the people who are in your cohort are just the most inspiring people. If I could spend more time around them, maybe their sort of like pixie dust would like rub off on me and I could like become a more giving person. So like I went into ACE trying to develop that in myself. And I had that very broad perspective. I didn't know if I was going to teach for forever or not, but I knew that that tone of service was something that I wanted to start off my career doing. And so that's what led me to ACE. And I'd say, by October of my first year of teaching, I had decided like, you know what, I'm not going to teach for forever, but this is a really, really good thing for me to do. And because it's not about me, it's because it's about my students. So like the pronoun shifts from I to my students or them. And or even in a better world, it shifts to us, right? Like how are we trying to move to better versions of ourselves? And so for me, even though I had that realization very early on in ACE, I understood that this was a great opportunity and great program to set the tone for literally whatever else was going to come in my career. So it wasn't like this great strategic plan, but it was something that I just had these questions that I wanted answered, and ACE really helped me. And the people that I was around in ACE really helped me kind of come to better versions of understanding of what it is that I wanted to do.
Yeah, no, that's really great to hear. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Hannah. Matthew, my question for you is, since you are still working in education down in Chile, did you always know that this was going to be the path for you? And if so, why did you decide to do ACE instead of going straight into a full-time teaching position? And if not, what about your ACE experience kind of led you to stay in the field of education?
So I actually did not want to get into the field of education when I was an undergrad. I studied political science at the University of Dayton, and for sure thought that my career was going to be in a political service or some sort of public service sector. But I'm a little bit unique in that my mom has worked for ACE, and I've been, as a byproduct, I've been around the program for over 20 years, so something like that. And the thing that really attracted me to the program is kind of what Matt was saying is there's just such great people every single year that are a part of the program. And a huge thing for me, a huge factor is after I learned more about politics and doing some work in the summers with some political campaigns, I didn't know if it was a career for me. But as a personal goal, I've always wanted to travel. And I knew that education, everywhere in the world, there is an opportunity to teach English or to teach in different schools. In every country, in every city, there are teachers that are needed, especially right now after the pandemic. And so when I initially applied to ACE, I went in for the people and I went in for the opportunities to travel. And since I've been a part of the program, I lived in Texas. I was able to live in New York City. Now I'm in Santiago, Chile. And it's really opened so many doors. And not only has the education factor been a part of it, but also the connections I've made in ACE in terms of the principals I've met in the summer that are involved with REMIC, the different teachers that I met who are in my cohort, who are now principals, who are now teaching in different schools and are always reaching out for different people to work at their schools. That really has been a huge impact in me. And after my first year of teaching, I recognized that I like teaching a lot. I really liked the relationship I made with my students. I very much liked the impact that they had on me, probably more so than I had on them. And I just really fell in love with the profession. Now, I don't know if I'm going to stay in teaching forever, but I do love the opportunities that it's open for me, and I do love where I'm at right now. And so I think that's probably been the biggest impact on me is just the doors it's open and the people that I've been able to meet through my experience in ACE.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. My next question for all three of you, then we'll kind of bring you guys back together. So now during your time post ACE, I just love to hear you talk a little bit about how your ACE experiences have been beneficial in your current position specifically. So maybe are there any skills or perspectives that you feel you gained from completing ACE that are transcended across, the various disciplines that you find yourselves in?
I can start with this one. One thing that you definitely have to be an ACE that you will be transferable to whatever position you're in is being very flexible and being able to roll with the punches. As everyone who's ever taught a class, you know that you can have a perfect lesson plan and you show up and there's a fire drill or something happens at recess that impacts the entire class that you have to address. And I know that in my travels in the different schools I've been at, every school is different, but it very much helps being flexible. And that leads to the second skill that I've definitely been able to learn is just being able to clearly communicate with your colleagues and your students. That's transferable, not just in the business world and the education world, but just in life. That very much helps with your relationships that you have with people. It very much helps with you being the best version of your own self. And so I think those are two skills of just being flexible and being able to learn how to communicate with others, especially when others may not see eye to eye with you. As a middle schooler, definitely does not see eye to eye when it's 3 o'clock on a Friday and we have 45 minutes left of English class and they don't want to do anything, but you got to communicate. Hey, we're here to learn and you're here because your parents want you to have the best education. We got to work together to get this done. And so those are definitely two skills that I've taken away from my experience in ACE.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I think, so for me, I'm jumping in here because I don't want Hannah to steal mine. So I think for me, and maybe this honestly is probably not true of Hannah's ACE experience because she seems like someone who's like pretty well put together. The thing that I learned in my ACE experience was, and I think a lot of people come to ACE having achieved some modicum of success through college, through whatever they've done up to that point. believe it or not, 8 weeks of summer training, as great as it is and as high quality as it is, does not prepare you, or at least it did not prepare me to teach Latin to middle schoolers in New Orleans. And so I sucked when I started teaching. Like, and I think sometimes people think about it as they want to blame the kids. Like, honestly, it was my fault. Like, if I had just been a better teacher and sort of like set up classroom procedures and sort of done a better job of organizing lesson plans and trying to meet my kiddos where they were and communicate, firm, fair, consistent things, it would have gone a lot better. But I think no amount of prep would have prepared me just for the amount of times that I was going to like take it on there were times like, and I am a pretty stable person, that I was like moved to, I am terrible at everything. Like, nothing that I do is working. And consequently, and my, my community members and my family was really good about this, particularly my mother. I would go to the point where I would say like, man, I just got my butt kicked today, and like, it's only Tuesday and I got to go. I got 3 more days of this and da 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 da. And my mom's was always really good about saying, no, you get to go back tomorrow and you get to fix all of the things that you did wrong today. You have a chance to try to fix everything that you didn't do and try to help your kids in a different way. So I'd say for me, the thing, and that I think is exceptionally applicable to what I do, because, now I'm in this world of, we're dealing with like geopolitical situations. We, allocate capital to China. We think about sort of what's going on coming out of the midterms. We're thinking about, is the economy going into a recession? So these are all, you're kind of constantly failing or having to like, you're confronted with, oh man, I should have done this document better, or I should have framed X better. So that opportunity to get comfortable failing and knowing that it doesn't mean that you're a terrible person. It means that that's how you grow, was one thing that I learned. And then that kind of like leads to my second one, which is learning how to teach yourself. And, there was no rule book for how you start a Latin program in like a middle school, or a better example is, how to start basketball teams. Like, my school didn't have sports teams, and there was not like a model of like, hey, here's how you do this. And like, this is how you set up a 2-3, you know what I mean? Like, these are just little things that you have to kind of figure out. And to do that, to have that opportunity to get so many at bats at A, failing, and then B, having to say like, okay, well, this method of trying to get my kids to use periods at the end of their sentences clearly did not work. So I need to find another way to do this. And trying to teach myself was, again, really applicable to what I do now. Because again, it's not like, again, unlike Maddie, I didn't study political science as an undergrad. So when we're talking about congressional negotiations and like how those things are going to go and how we're going to explain that to our clients, that's something that's like, all right, I got to learn this, digest it, put it into a format that these clients who really care about our expertise are going to care about and are going to understand, and then present it to them. So that's those two skill sets I found to be like exceptionally transferable, and I learned them both in the classroom.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Real quick, how did that middle school basketball experience go? Because I can't think of something that taught me failure more than the middle school basketball team I coached. So I'd love to hear how yours went.
I don't know if Mike Comunello told you to tell. Like, this is Mike Comunello loses his mind so my first year, I'd love to say that we, figured out how our first game, we were just getting waxed, just polished off. And my kids had never played, a lot of them had not played organized sport before, but we were just getting crushed. And to the point where like one of my kids, Tyler Davis, came up to me in the third quarter and like grabbed my shirt and was like, Mr. Rhodes. And I'm like, yeah, what do you need? Because I was like having to remind my kids to like run up and down the court. And he goes, Mr. Rhodes, can I go buy some chips from the concession stand? And I'm like, no, you can't. It's like, it was just, that was where and again, like I said, I'd love to say that we got really good, but we lost like literally every single game my first year. And this is I'll never forget this moment. So I was talking to my dad after this, and, I was looking for like literally any pearl of wisdom, like anything to just make me feel better. And I had just explained to him, I thought we had a chance in this game. We were like 0-12 and blah, 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 blah. And he goes, well, Matt, some people just don't have it as coaches. And I was like, really, Pop? Like, why don't you just like stomp on my throat when I'm down? Like, that's really appreciative. That means a lot to me. Thank you. So anyway, so we got much better. We had 2 key transfers my second year, got much better, but we started from the bottom.
Hey, that's what they always say. If you can't coach, you can at least recruit well. So I'm glad to hear that that worked for you. Sorry, Hannah, I jumped in front of you. Go ahead.
No, you're just fine. That was great to hear that story. I also coached when I coached volleyball. And I coached middle school volleyball. I didn't even make my middle school volleyball team, so I was not the person to coach. But I did, and we did not have a winning record, but that was fine. I feel like there's just something really special about seeing joy in others' eyes, and so the girls that I coached, they really they found joy in their own ways, even if it was like doing a TikTok dance while they should be playing, then it was just fine. Well, it was and it wasn't fine, but it was what they were going to do. But yeah, I really agree with what you both said. So I'm sorry if I'm echoing that, but I do agree that there are so many transferable skills that I think I really had the privilege of getting to grow in, and they look so different too. I mean, it can be something like you become very detail oriented because you're making all these lesson plans or these unit plans, or you're just trying to pick up on all the details in the classroom of, is this person, do they have their head down because they're having a bad day, or what is it? But it can also just be something like you maybe become more attuned to what you need on a given day. If you've been at school all day and then that night it doesn't look like you're going to be grading papers, but instead that you're going to just be hanging out with your community and really having a good time there. Maybe that's how you pour into yourself. So I think that really, if I were to categorize the skills, I guess that I'm the most grateful for from ACE, it would be just those skills that are kind of from the heart, and like how you love others and yourself well, and how that's going to vary from day to day, and the many different shapes it will take. And then in another category, maybe more like your work ethic, like how are you going to organize your day, prioritize your responsibilities, communicate with others, whether they're 11 or they're a parent in their 40s, 30s, whatever it is, and how you're going to be professional. And then also, I mean, community is such a big component of ACE. So I think that that's another skill in itself of how are you going to really show up for others when it doesn't have to be in a professional setting. It's just you being your authentic self, and meeting others where they are, yes, but allowing them to meet you where you are. And sometimes that requires like a little bit of humility and breaking down, like I didn't have a good day. I mean, there really were days where it was like, oh, I did everything wrong. But it was my community members who were like, oh yeah, me too. Or they were like, no, let's talk through it and like, let's flesh out. No, it was 10 seconds. It didn't go well. And that doesn't mean it was a bad day. So I'm really grateful for all the skills that, and all the lessons that I've received through ACE. It is very interesting now to be like on the other side of the classroom. It's kind of, well, it is really fun. And I've certainly gained this deeper appreciation for education, and seeing like what my professors are doing. I can think through like, oh, I know that they can really take as much time as they want grading because it took me forever to grade when it would just be like 5 math problems. So when they're grading essays, they can take their time. But yeah, I am really looking forward to, I think that down the road, I'll find that there are new skills and new lessons that I will learn, and I will be able to trace back to my time in ACE and think that, oh, that's really where it started. And I'm just seeing it really blooming, or that seed that's been planted, I'm seeing it bloom now.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. That's great to hear. And I can't believe that your middle school volleyball players were taking TikToks during practice. Like that's so shocking to me. How could they have done that? Awesome. Well, hey, now we've got a little bit of time for a few questions from all of you from the crowd. So if you guys just want to raise your Zoom hand, if you've got a question for our great panelists, and then I'll call you out by name. Once I call you out by name, you can unmute yourself and ask the questions directly. If that works for you guys. Yeah, Patrick, go ahead, my man.
Hey, first and foremost, thank you everybody for participating. Really appreciate it. For Hannah and Matthew, being a poli-sci in pre-med and going through the ACE program, did you do anything before joining ACE and getting that acceptance letter to learn about, maybe teaching procedures, working with a local high school or middle school, anything like that?
So
Yeah,
go ahead, Anna.
sorry. So I was an ACE intern, which certainly, so I did that in my senior year and applied my junior year. So that certainly helped me learn more about ACE and learn more about the heart of ACE. But in terms of teaching, I didn't really have much experience teaching before my time in ACE. I certainly spent time with kids, whether that was at a camp or whether that was through like a club at Notre Dame where I could go into a middle school and spend time with them. But there wasn't a formality to it. I was never in a position of authority, which I don't know if I really was in the classroom. Maybe I was, I don't know. But yeah, so I think that the 8 weeks, there's a lot that kind of you learn and kind of that comes at you, and it is really helpful. But a lot of it is just really learning on the go and learning every day and reshaping what you do and growing every day. And it's really interesting to look back at where you were a week ago or a year ago, or at the end of your time in ACE where you were 2 years ago, and just think of all the ways that you grew. And you could say like, oh yeah, I really am a teacher and I really did teach that lesson well and I taught these units well. So yeah, I think that at this point I'm impressed by how I grew a lot from not really having much experience before.
For me personally, I was involved with a few clubs that we would go to local schools. So I studied political science and Spanish. And so one of my classes for Spanish was to go to a dual language school in downtown Dayton. And I would go into a second grade classroom and I'd pull students out and I'd help with that. So that and talking with the teachers definitely helped me. Like Hannah, I wasn't an ACE intern, but I was an ACE advocate, which meant that I would help recruit other people at the University of Dayton and other schools in Ohio to the program. And so being around the program, I was able to ask some of my friends who were education majors some procedures before I got there. But kind of what Hannah said, I mean, the best practice is just to practice. I mean, just to get into the classroom and start teaching. The 8 weeks is definitely very intense, and there's definitely a lot of things you can learn and you take from it. But the second summer is when I came back and I was like, oh, I have context now. I know what questions to ask. Because the first summer, it's a lot of information, but you're just like, okay, I don't really know how I'm going to use this. And then when you get to October, you're like, oh my God, Sister Gail was so right. I should have been doing X, Y, and Z from the beginning. So it's definitely something that you don't have to have background in, because they'll definitely help you through it. But if you know you're interested in ACE, one tool maybe is to get involved in a local school, or would be to maybe ask friends who you know or education majors about their personal experiences in the classroom and their pedagogy.
Yeah, if there's one thing I learned from my 2 years in ACE, it is that Sister Gail is always right. She's always. Okay, we've got time for one more question from the audience. So if you want to go ahead and raise that Zoom hand, we can call on you if you have them. Great. Well, in that case, my closing question for all of our panelists, if you guys just want to go around really quickly in 30 seconds or left or less, maybe say just what's one thing that you find yourself being the most grateful for from your time in ACE now that you've been, a year or two removed from the program?
I'm going to go first because it's probably going to be very cliche, and I know the other two could definitely say it. Definitely the people I've met in the program. I now have lifelong friends, like friends who will be a part of my wedding, and many people who will be at my wedding who I met in ACE. So I'm not engaged, Matt. I'm not engaged. Don't worry. But I definitely I definitely made so many friendships that will last a lifetime. So that's my biggest takeaway from ACE.
Yeah, just to jump off of that, because I know kind of like that, like I want to get it in because I know you'll want to say the same thing. But I would just say relationships, that I'm really, really grateful for my community and people that I've gotten to know both in my cohort, above me, below me, the ACE team, and then also just my students. I think about them all the time and I miss them all the time, and their families too. I mean, being so far away from home, it was great to feel that I still had figures in my life who were going to take me in and were really going to care for me, even if I wasn't a part of their blood family.
All right. Well, since they took like the good ones, like I'll find something, I'll have to like say something like my faith, I guess. So I think for me, I think for me, one of those things of starting eighth was very broad questions of like, what does it mean to like serve other people, which sounds really basic, but can become it's the quest of a lifetime, journey of a lifetime to try to like figure out how we can serve one another the way we're called to in the gospel. And I think ACE was such a great opportunity to explore that, obviously with amazing people, but also, how that love takes different shapes every day from supporting a community member or having a community member support you to, making mistakes with students and having them forgive you, or how to speak with parents who are entrusting their most prized possession in this world to you for 40 minutes or 90 minutes every day to try to teach them. I think for me, it was such a great faith experience, like a lived faith experience that, I always joke that, you maybe trade the sort of monetary security that some people would have immediately out of college, but you get just like truly golden experiences from doing something like ACE. So for me, that's what I still think about that, and something that I'm really grateful for every day.
Yeah, that's quite beautiful. So thank you all. And thank you to our panelists for joining us tonight and offering your wisdom to all of our guests. And thank you to all of our guests for being here and attending tonight. This is going to do it for our final webinar of this fall. So we'll have some more coming out upcoming in the spring. But just thank you to all of you guys who have come and supported and come to listen. And that'll do it for tonight. So if you do have any other questions, if anything did come up in the meantime, feel free to stick around after on the call after we conclude here. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here and enjoy the rest of your night.
Ryan, did you have a question earlier?
Yeah, I just had a quick question if there's still time. I was curious, since you loved your time in the classroom so much, how would you describe that transition from being a teacher back into like the workforce? And were you like applying during your second year of teaching, and were you or did you like was it just a personal like, oh, I wish I was back teaching when you got back into the workforce? So like, how was that overall transition, both like professionally and personally? I was curious about.
Yeah. Is that for me?
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
Sweet. So I'd say the transition my transition was a little bit of, I didn't go straight from ACE into Goldman Sachs. I went from ACE to Notre Dame to Goldman Sachs. So I took kind of like a long exit ramp, I guess, as it were. And anyone who does ACE knows that there's like really only one way out, and it's feet first. And so you're kind of always still involved in ACE. So I I would say that my second year of ACE, I was starting to look, I ended up back at Notre Dame, but that wasn't necessarily what I set out to do per se. That opportunity became available. So I was applying to things at the beginning of my second year. And I really used a lot of time during my second summer of ACE to be starting to like set the stage for that. And I think the biggest thing was trying to have a set, like know where to apply. And I think that's the biggest thing that I thought like that I had to just do a lot of legwork on. So knowing, when people say, I think it's kosher in college to say like, hey, I want to do business, but like anyone in business, I was like, I want to do business is like saying like, I like, it's like boiling the ocean. Like it can't be done. You know what I mean? Like, it's like when you say you do business, like, what does that mean? You want to do consulting? You want to do marketing? You want to do investment banking? Like, so to me, trying to start to narrow that down was something that I tried to spend time doing during my second summer of ACE, and I had the opportunity to do that. And then once I actually made that transition, I think part of that transition was trying to understanding how to package what I did in ACE to try to like make it applicable to what I was trying to do. But then once I made that transition to Notre Dame, and then from Notre Dame to ACE, or from Notre Dame to Goldman, I think the thing that I miss the most about working with ACE people is the sense like you will be it's the quality of human being in ACE. I cannot overstate to you how, like, so where are you doing your undergrad?
I went to the University of Undergrad. I'm at the University of Chicago right now.
Okay, great. Yeah. So like you're at a great university right now, right? And like but it's almost like if you think about the best that Chicago has to offer and like just the most amazing motivated people, like those are the kinds of people who do ACE. And it is just to be surrounded by people who are just so good is something that I miss. Perhaps maybe it's because I work at Goldman Sachs now, but like I'd say that is something that I miss the most is sort of just like you have people who shared mission, incredible people, and also insanely talented people. So anyway, so that's what I'd say for me was that what I miss. But I have to be honest, like I knew I didn't want to teach. So there's not been a day where I'm like, God, I really want to go teach seventh grade again. Again, not to say that that's a bad thing, not to say that I don't think it's insanely valuable, but that was not, I just knew that that was what I was called to do. So.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And Ryan, if you're in Chicago, I know for a fact that there are two Chicagoans from my cohort and Joe's cohort, Kathleen Rocks and Casey Valentin, that are there, and they would gladly, I'm going to speak for them, they would gladly talk to you about their experiences and ACE. And then you'd also recognize that they're just rock stars. They're both awesome human beings.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I would love to if that's possible.
Yeah. To add on to that, my housemate went to U Chicago too. And she's in ACE right now, in San Jose too. If you want to talk to her, Gabby Silva is her name. She would love to talk. And I was just gonna say that at the end of ACE, you do kind of like owe it to yourself to explore what you want to do after ACE. And if that is still teaching, then yeah, go for it and still teach. But in the same way that you would want your students to explore their interests, you should be able to as well. And that doesn't mean that you can never go back to teaching. That door doesn't close. You can't always go back, but you just have the opportunity to find what it is that you really enjoy doing.
Okay, cool. Hannah, I missed the beginning of the call. Are you still teaching now, or what are you doing now?
Sorry, I'm not teaching. I'm getting my master's right now.
Okay, cool.
I'm getting my master's in public health.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sticking around with that question, Ryan. Sorry I missed you on the call. I don't know what happened, but it was a great question, so I'm glad we got to answer it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.